The air was thick with the metallic scent of burning rubber. Tires screeched against the unforgiving asphalt as the car spun out of control, its headlights slicing through the night like an angel's cruel scream. The crash was deafening, a cacophony of metal twisting and glass shattering, but amidst the chaos, there was a silence that felt unnatural, a silence that clung to the streets long after the dust had settled. In the midst of the wreckage, half hidden beneath a tangled mess of steel and debris, there was a sound that didn't belong to the accident. A faint cry, a delicate whimper, the fragile breath of a newborn. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Time stretched. Then, as if the universe had decided it was time for something extraordinary, a dog appeared. Her coat, once gleaming, now covered in the dust of the crash, moved with purpose. Her eyes, dark and ancient with wisdom, swept over the wreckage, scanning for life, for anything that could still feel. She was no ordinary dog. This was Maya. And in the worst of moments, Maya would prove to be more than anyone could ever imagine. She trotted through the wreckage with slow, deliberate steps. As the sirens wailed in the distance, her gaze fell upon something small and vulnerable, tucked underneath a bent fender. A baby, alone, forgotten by the disaster that had shattered everything around it. What Maya did next would change everything. Show your love, hit like, share, and subscribe for more. The city had been cloaked in darkness for hours, the heavy rain creating an almost surreal, oppressive atmosphere. The kind of night where nothing felt alive, just a vast, empty stretch of gray roads and misty air. Maya, a stray dog, had learned to find comfort in these dark corners of the world, where nobody bothered to look for her. The city was a jungle, but she had become its silent observer. She had wandered through alleyways and side streets, searching for food, warmth, or sometimes just a fleeting moment of peace. Maya was no stranger to the noise of the city. The honking of cars, the rumbling of engines, the clattering of construction, they had all become part of the soundtrack of her existence. But this night, something was different. The usual noise was interrupted by an ear-splitting screech of tires. A shriek so loud it made Maya's ears stand up. For a brief moment she froze, her tail stiff with alarm. This wasn't the usual city clamor. This was something wrong. Maya's instincts took over. She immediately bounded toward the sound, her paws slapping the wet pavement with urgent desperation. The rain, pouring down in sheets, blurred the world around her, but her senses were razor sharp. She had been on the streets long enough to know when something needed to be checked, when something required attention. The sound of metal crunching against metal, followed by the sickening, sharp thud of impact, made her heart race. As she ran, her breath became labored, her chest heaving with every stride. The city had always felt cold, indifferent to the pain and struggles of those who lived within it, but tonight it felt colder. The crash had been too violent to ignore. She had to find out what had happened, who had been hurt, and if there was anything she could do help. Turning the corner, the scene unfolded before her like a nightmare. The once pristine sedan was now a twisted wreck, steam rising from its engine, the windshield shattered, and its tires deflated, unable to hold the weight of the destruction. The car had slammed into a lamppost, its front end crumpled beyond recognition. Maya hesitated for only a moment before moving closer, her instincts pulling her toward the wreckage. The sounds of the night, the wind, the rain, faded as she focused on the wrecked vehicle. Her nose twitched. Amidst the wreckage, through the broken windows and jagged edges of metal, there was something else. A faint sound, a cry. Maya's heart skipped a beat. She didn't know where it was coming from at first, but the more she focused, the clearer it became. A small, fragile cry. A human cry. Maya's eyes darted around, scanning the wreckage, her body tense, her heart pounding. She had seen humans, but never this close, never in this context. They had always been out of reach, moving too fast for her to notice. But this was different. This cry was not just a sound, it was a call for help, and it was coming from somewhere close by. She trotted forward, her paws slipping in the slick puddles. There, tucked beneath the twisted metal of the sedan, she saw it, a baby. The small body was barely visible, hidden beneath the crumpled fender, wrapped loosely in a blanket that had been torn in the chaos. The baby's face was streaked with dirt and rain, its eyes wide, and its tiny hands were reaching out. There was no one else here. The baby was alone, discarded in the aftermath of the crash. For a moment Maya froze, her instincts battling against the pull of empathy that surged within her. Her heart raced, and she found herself hesitating, unsure of what to do. She had never been a caretaker. She had never been someone's protector. She was just a dog, a stray who had never known a steady hand of love or care. Her survival had always been about taking care of herself, staying out of the way of the humans who dominated this world. But in this moment, all those thoughts faded. The baby needed her. There was no one else. And it was not a question of survival anymore. It was a question of doing what was right. Maya stepped closer to the baby, her paws gingerly brushing against the debris as she approached. She sniffed the air. The baby was alive, weak but breathing. Maya's breath caught in her throat as the baby's tiny fingers reached toward her, instinctively seeking warmth, safety, something familiar. There was an urgency in that touch, in the baby's reach, as if it already knew that this dog was its only hope. Maya's body trembled, and her instincts screamed at her to run, to stay away. But she couldn't. Not now. She gently nudged the baby, her cold nose brushing against its soft skin, as if trying to reassure it. It was small and vulnerable, a life that had just been torn apart by an accident. The baby whimpered, but Maya's presence calmed it slightly, as though her very being offered some semblance of comfort. She stared down at the baby, the rain still pouring, the chaos still surrounding her. The world was spinning in every direction, yet here, in the middle of the wreckage, there was something still, something pure. The baby needed her, and for the first time, Maya understood that she could be something more than just a stray dog wandering the streets. She could be a protector. With one final breath, Maya stepped forward, her mouth gently nudging the baby. She picked it up, her body low to the ground, her legs moving cautiously as she adjusted to the weight of the small life in her mouth. The baby was light, but fragile, and Maya handled it with the utmost care. She stepped away from the wreckage, her eyes scanning the surrounding streets for any signs of danger. She was determined to keep this baby safe. It was no longer a matter of surviving. It was about something much bigger than herself. It was about protecting this tiny life, in any way she could. And as the city hummed around her, Maya walked away from the wreckage, the storm now nothing but a distant memory. In this moment, Maya became something new, a guardian. Maya's legs ached with the strain of running, her paws sore from the sudden sprint through the rain-soaked streets. Her heart raced, the baby still cradled gently in her mouth. She had no destination in mind, no plan to follow. The sirens in the distance grew louder, the sound of approaching help. But Maya knew that help would not reach them in time. The baby, so small and fragile, was at risk of losing the one person who could protect it. The weight of the responsibility pressed heavily on Maya's shoulders. She wasn't a hero, she was just a dog. She had lived her life in the shadows of the city, avoiding humans, surviving on scraps, and navigating the harsh realities of street life. But this was different. This wasn't about her anymore. This wasn't about survival. It was about something else, something that stirred deep within her. Something she couldn't quite understand but knew was essential. The baby needed her. And in that moment, Maya realized that for once in her life, she had to make a choice that would define her existence, a choice that would change the course of the night. Her breath came in shallow, hurried gasps as she trotted through the alleyway, her body now trembling with exhaustion. The sound of the rain had softened, replaced by the distant hum of the city, the low murmur of the world moving on as if nothing had happened. Maya paused, her heart thumping against her chest, and she looked down at the baby, its face still streaked with dirt, its tiny body shivering from the cold. The baby stirred in her mouth, and Maya's grip tightened instinctively. The baby needed warmth, safety, shelter. She couldn't stay here in the alley. It wasn't safe enough. The wreckage had been a chaotic mess, but this alley, dark and abandoned, felt even worse. There was no protection here. There was no shelter. But the baby's soft whimpers broke through her hesitation. Maya gently set the baby down on the cold, damp pavement, her nose brushing against its tiny form, checking to make sure it was still breathing. Her own heart twisted with worry. She didn't know what she was doing. She had never been trained for this. No one had ever taught her how to care for another living being. But the love and tenderness she felt for this baby in that moment was as raw and as real as anything she had ever known. She looked up, her eyes scanning the streets. There was no one, no sign of the police or paramedics, no other human presence. It was just her and the baby, a fragile soul in her care. Maya's instincts told her to run, to take the baby somewhere, anywhere, far from the wreckage, far from the danger. But where? Where could she go? Her eyes darted around. desperate for an answer, her mind racing with possibilities. And then she saw it. A small storefront up ahead, its windows covered with faded advertisements and a sign that flickered weakly in the distance. The building was old, its bricks chipped, but it looked abandoned, tucked away from the bustling streets. The sign read, "Bakers and Butchers," though there was no sign of life inside. It was quiet, secluded, a perfect place to hide away from the world. With a surge of determination, Maya carefully picked the baby up again, her mouth cradling it with the utmost gentleness. She moved swiftly, almost instinctively, her legs carrying her toward the small shop. As she moved closer, she felt a strange sense of peace. The shop, though abandoned, felt safe. She could leave the baby here just for a moment to catch her breath, to plan her next move. Maya pushed the door open with a soft nudge of her nose, the door creaking loudly as it swung open. The shop was dark inside, but Maya could see the dusty shelves and wooden tables lined with old tools and forgotten goods. It smelled of stale bread and old wood, a scent that felt oddly comforting in the midst of everything that had happened. She padded further into the space, finding a corner near the back of the room where she could rest the baby on a pile of old burlap sacks. The baby was still breathing, though its whimpers had faded into shallow breaths. Maya carefully set it down, making sure the little one was comfortable, its body nestled in the soft, worn fabric. She stepped back for a moment, her heart pounding, her mind overwhelmed with the enormity of what she had just done. She had made a decision, and now there was no going back. Maya's body trembled from exhaustion, but she forced herself to sit on her haunches, her eyes never leaving the baby. She licked her lips nervously and let out a small sigh, her head spinning with questions she couldn't answer. What now? What would happen when the humans finally arrived? What if they didn't find the baby in time? What if they didn't believe her? But there was no time for doubt. The baby needed her, and Maya wasn't going to let go. She had made the decision to protect it, and she would see it through, no matter what. She sat there for a while, watching the baby, her heart aching as the small, fragile form shifted slightly in its sleep. Maya's eyes softened, her protective instincts filling every inch of her being. This wasn't about the crash. It wasn't about the pain of the world outside. It was about the baby, this tiny, innocent life that had somehow found its way into her care. Maya remained in the shop, her body tense with the weight of her decision, her mind racing with the uncertainty of what would come next. But for now, she was doing what she knew best. She was being the protector. And in that moment, she realized something she had never known before. She was capable of love, a love so pure, so strong. It gave her the courage to make this choice, to protect a life that wasn't her own. And that was all that mattered. The rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle, leaving the air thick and heavy with humidity. Maya's paws ached from the long journey, her muscles trembling from the weight of the baby she had so carefully protected. Her coat was damp, matted with the remnants of the storm, but she barely noticed. Her attention was solely on the small form nestled among the burlap sacks, its tiny chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Maya remained still, her eyes never leaving the baby. The soft whimper that occasionally escaped the child's lips pierced Maya's heart with an intensity she had never felt before. For the first time in a long while, Maya was consumed by an overwhelming sense of responsibility, a need to keep this tiny life safe no matter what the cost. She had no plan, no idea where the night would take them, but she knew she couldn't stay here forever. This shop, while safe for now, wasn't home. It wasn't enough. The baby needed warmth, care, attention, and above all, shelter from the storm, both the literal one and the figurative one. She had to find help. But where? Her eyes scanned the dim room, the dusty shelves and the old wooden tables. Her mind raced as she tried to figure out the best course of action. She could hear the distant hum of the city, the faint echo of sirens, but there was no guarantee that anyone would know where to look for them. The wreckage was already forgotten by the world, and the crash had already faded into the background of the city's ceaseless pace. Maya knew this city, how quickly things were ignored, how quickly lives were swept under the rug. The baby stirred slightly, and Maya felt a sudden surge of panic flood through her. She couldn't stay here. She couldn't let this little one slip through her paws. Maya knew she had to keep moving. She had no other choice. Her eyes flickered to the door, and she took a deep breath, gathering her resolve. The rain had stopped, but the chill in the air remained. She could feel it gnawing at her, but the thought of the baby being left in this abandoned shop, alone and exposed, pushed her forward. The city loomed just outside, vast and unknown yet full of possibilities. She carefully stepped toward the baby, nudging it gently with her nose. The baby whimpered in its sleep but did not wake. With a tender, cautious motion, Maya scooped it back into her mouth. She had learned how to carry fragile things before, scraps of food, small, helpless animals, even things she had found on the streets, but nothing had ever felt as delicate as this child. The baby was so small, its body so light, its skin so soft and warm against her fur. Maya's heart clenched with the weight of it, but she didn't falter. She had made a promise to protect it, and she was determined to keep that promise. Maya took her first step out of the shop, her paws tentative at first. The door creaked behind her, and she flinched at the sound, instinctively glancing over her shoulder. The world outside seemed unchanged, but Maya knew she was no longer the same. She had carried the baby through the wreckage, through the storm, and now she was carrying it into the unknown. The streets were quiet, the sidewalks slick with the remnants of the rain. The faint glow of streetlights cast long shadows, but the world felt somehow emptier than it had just hours ago. The city, so familiar to Maya, now seemed cold and indifferent, like a place she no longer belonged. There was no place for a stray dog with a baby in her mouth, no place for someone who had never mattered. But Maya wasn't concerned with that anymore. She had one goal: to find safety for the baby, and for that she would go anywhere. Her paws were unsteady on the wet pavement, but she pushed forward, her head held high as she navigated through the empty streets. The baby stirred slightly, its small body shifting in Maya's mouth. Maya slowed her pace, adjusting her grip, ensuring the baby was safe and secure. It wasn't just about the journey, it was about the baby's well-being. Every step was a promise she had made, a commitment she would honor. As Maya moved further into the city, she passed through alleyways and side streets she had once known well, her steps echoing in the stillness of the night. The city felt different now. It wasn't the same place she had once navigated with ease. Now it felt vast, overwhelming, and dangerous. The further she moved, the more she felt the weight of her responsibility. Every step she took felt like a leap of faith. She reached an intersection where the glow of a neon sign illuminated the street. Maya hesitated, her eyes scanning the unfamiliar area. There was a small, nondescript building on the corner, a brick facade that seemed to blend into the rest of the city's maze. It wasn't much, but Maya felt a pull, a sense that this might be the right place. She moved toward it cautiously, her eyes darting around for any sign of danger. The building was quiet, its windows dark. Maya nudged the door open with her nose, careful not to make too much noise. It was another shop, a small convenience store that had long since closed for the night. The door creaked slightly as it opened, and Maya slipped inside, her body low to the ground as she navigated through the narrow aisles. The smell of old food and stale air filled her nose, but she barely noticed. Her focus was entirely on the baby, the fragile life she had sworn to protect. Maya set the baby down on a small shelf at the back of the store, her heart pounding in her chest. The baby had been calm, almost lifeless in her mouth, but now it began to stir. Maya stepped back slightly, her tail low as she watched the baby's tiny fingers twitch. The baby's chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, and for a moment Maya allowed herself to breathe. It was alive. The baby was still with her. But the sense of urgency had not left her. There was no time to waste. Maya's eyes darted back to the door. She couldn't stay here forever. She had to keep moving. The world was waiting for her to make a choice, to find a place where the baby could truly be safe. But where? She licked her lips nervously, her mind racing. But as she stared down at the baby, something inside her shifted. For the first time, she knew that it didn't matter where she went. As long as she had the baby, she would always find a way. Maya turned, determined to keep moving forward, her journey not yet complete. The city had seemed cold and indifferent, but now it felt like it was full of possibilities, because with the baby in her care, anything was possible. The rain had stopped, but the dampness still clung to the streets like a heavy fog, making the world feel muffled, softened. Maya's paused, which had once moved with confidence through the harshness of the city streets, now felt unsure, tentative as they pressed against the wet pavement. She was exhausted. The weight of the baby, so small yet so important, made her movements slower, more deliberate. The baby had not cried since Maya had carried it into the convenience store, its tiny chest rising and falling with each shallow breath. Maya sat back on her haunches, her eyes never leaving the small form nestled in the corner of the store. Every so often, the baby would stir, but it remained eerily quiet, as though waiting for something, someone. Maya's heart ached at the thought of its vulnerability, its fragility. Maya wasn't sure where to go next. The city loomed ahead, a vast, intimidating expanse that had always felt so impersonal. It was as though the city was a living, breathing entity, indifferent to the struggles of those who lived within its concrete walls. Maya had known this world for years, had navigated it with her own kind of quiet strength, but now everything felt different. Now she wasn't just a stray dog blending into the shadows. Now she was a guardian, and the baby, this tiny, fragile soul, had become her responsibility. She had no idea how to protect it in a world so cold, so indifferent, but she had to try. For the baby's sake. The sound of distant footsteps caught her attention. She froze, her ears straining to hear. Were they human footsteps? Were they coming closer? Maya's heart skipped a beat as she scrambled to her feet, her eyes scanning the store's dim interior for a place to hide. But there was no place for her to hide now, no alley to slip into, no shadow to disappear into. She couldn't afford to let anyone take the baby from her. Not now. Not after everything she had done to get here. Her body tensed as the footsteps grew louder, closer. The door to the convenience store creaked open, and Maya instinctively backed up, her body low to the ground, her tail tucked between her legs. A figure appeared in the doorway, a man, his face obscured by the dim light from the street. His eyes swept the room, lingering for a moment on the back corner where Maya had left the baby. Maya's breath caught in her throat. What would he do? Would he take the baby? Would he call the authorities and report her for carrying it away from the wreckage? Would he see her as a threat or a savior? The man stepped further into the store, his eyes scanning the shelves, and for a moment, Maya felt like she was invisible. She remained still, watching his every movement with a mixture of curiosity and anxiety. He didn't seem to be in a hurry, didn't seem to notice the tension in the air. Maya knew she had to act quickly. She couldn't wait for him to approach the baby. The longer they stayed here, the greater the risk of being found. With a quiet, low growl in her throat, Maya moved toward the door, careful to keep herself out of the man's line of sight. She glanced back at the baby, her heart aching. The baby still hadn't cried, but Maya could feel the pull of its small, fragile life calling to her. She couldn't stay here. Not with a stranger so close. With one final look at the baby, Maya slipped through the door and into the street. Her heart pounded in her chest as she moved swiftly, her legs still sore from the previous journey, but her resolve stronger than ever. She had no idea where she was going, but she knew that she couldn't stay in the convenience store any longer. There was too much at stake. The city stretched out before her, its towering buildings and narrow streets feeling like a maze of possibilities and dangers. She could feel the weight of the baby's life in her mouth, the tiny body so fragile, so precious, and she knew that no matter how lost she felt, she had to find a way to keep the baby safe. Her steps quickened as she moved through the empty streets, her ears flicking nervously at every sound. The quiet hum of the city was unsettling. The world was awake, but it didn't feel alive. It felt like everything was a little too far away, like Maya was carrying a secret that no one else would understand. She didn't know where she was headed. Just forward, one step at a time through alleyways and empty intersections, her eyes scanning for any sign of safety, any sign of help. The moon had risen higher in the sky, its pale light casting long shadows across the streets, but there was still an emptiness to the night that Maya couldn't shake. She wasn't just lost. She was a guardian wandering through a world that didn't belong to her, a stray with a responsibility she had never asked for. As Maya passed by a row of closed shops, she noticed something that gave her pause. A small, well-kept park sat at the end of the street, its wrought iron gate rusted but intact. The trees, though bare, provided a semblance of shelter, a place of calm amidst the city's chaos. Maya paused, her ears pricking up at the sound of distant laughter. Children's laughter, echoing faintly from within the park. Her heart swelled with a strange, hopeful feeling. The park could be a place of refuge, a place where she could rest, where the baby could have a moment of peace. Maya trotted toward the gate. The baby still cradled gently in her mouth. The gate creaked as she pushed it open, its rusty hinges protesting, but she didn't care. Inside, the park was quiet, its pathways lined with bare trees that whispered softly in the breeze. The air here smelled of damp earth and leaves, and for the first time in hours, Maya felt like she could breathe. She padded down the path, her steps echoing softly in the stillness. The park felt like an oasis in the middle of the city, a place where the noise and chaos of the outside world seemed distant, almost unreal. Maya found a quiet spot beneath a large oak tree, its twisted branches providing some shelter from the remaining chill of the night. She carefully set the baby down on the grass, its tiny body still warm from the protection of her mouth. Maya sat back on her haunches, her body exhausted, but her heart swelling with a fierce protectiveness. The baby was safe for now, and that was all that mattered. The stillness of the park felt foreign to Maya. She was used to the chaos of the streets, the noise, the constant rush of life, or at least the appearance of it. But here, the world seemed to be holding its breath. The distant city lights flickered faintly in the distance, like a broken promise of something better, while the trees around her swayed gently in the breeze. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful, and for the first time in hours, Maya allowed herself to pause and truly take in her surroundings. The baby, still resting in the patch of grass beneath the large oak tree, stirred slightly, a soft murmur escaping its lips. Maya's heart clenched, her protective instincts flaring as she moved closer, nuzzling the baby gently with her nose. Its tiny body was still so warm, so fragile. Maya's paws ached, her muscles sore from the constant motion, but it was the weight of the decision ahead that gnawed at her. She had been running, had been acting on instinct since she found the wreckage, but now that they were in a safer place, she found herself questioning her every move. What was she doing here? Was she even capable of protecting this baby in a world so indifferent? Her life had been simple, in a way. She had survived by the rules of the streets: stay out of the way, find food, find shelter, keep moving. There had never been a moment where she had been responsible for someone else's life. Maya had never been anyone's protector. She had been a survivor, just like the millions of others roaming the city. But now it was different. Now she had a life to protect. A tiny, helpless life that depended entirely on her. Maya's eyes scanned the park once more, the trees casting long shadows in the dim light. It was quiet here, but she knew it wouldn't last. The city was alive, bustling, even in the middle of the night. People would be out soon looking for the baby, looking for answers. What would happen then? Would they blame her for taking the baby? Would they see her as a threat, a stray with a history too dangerous to trust? Or would they see her as a hero, someone who had acted when no one else had? Maya's ears flicked as she heard the faint sound of footsteps approaching. It was still far off, but she could hear them clearly, and her instincts flared once more. She couldn't stay here. She couldn't afford to be caught. Not now, not with the baby still in her care. Her breath quickened, and for a moment, she was paralyzed by indecision. What if someone else found them? What if the baby was taken from her? Could she fight for it? Could she keep it safe? Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft sound of the baby crying. It was small at first, barely a whimper, but it grew louder, more desperate, its voice shaking in the cool night air. Maya's body stiffened, her protective instincts overriding everything else. She couldn't let the baby cry like this. She couldn't let it be vulnerable, exposed to the dangers of the world. But where could she go? The city stretched out before her, wide, vast, intimidating. She had no plan, no destination in mind. She couldn't stay in the park. It was too open, too easy to find. Maya's heart raced as she glanced around, searching for a place, any place, where she could keep the baby safe. But the more she looked, the more hopeless it seemed. The city, with all its alleyways and hidden corners, felt more like a maze than a home. The baby's cries grew louder, and Maya's nerves flared. She couldn't stop the sound, she had to do something. But what? In the distance, Maya saw a flicker of movement. A light from a passing car, the glow of headlights cutting through the shadows. The realization hit her like a jolt. She couldn't stay out here forever. The city wasn't safe, and she couldn't keep running. The baby needed care, warmth, stability. Things that Maya didn't have the ability to provide on her own. She needed help, and the only way to get it was to trust someone, to find someone who could help. But who could she trust? She had learned to avoid humans. They had always been strangers to her, indifferent and unpredictable. But now, the thought of finding someone who could help seemed like the only choice. She had no more answers, no more places to hide. Maya's heart clenched at the thought. She had never been good at trusting. She had learned to survive on her own, to avoid relying on anyone. But this wasn't just about her anymore. This was about the baby who had no one else, the baby who needed safety, warmth, love. It was a daunting thought. Maya's gaze softened as she looked down at the baby, still curled in a ball beneath the oak tree, its tiny hands pressed against the ground. It was calm now, as if it too were waiting for something, for someone. Maya let out a deep sigh, her shoulders sagging with the weight of her decision. She couldn't do this alone. With a final glance at the baby, Maya stood and walked toward the edge of the park, her eyes scanning the streets. She had to make a choice. She had to trust someone, no matter how difficult it was. The world outside might be indifferent, but she couldn't let that stop her from finding the help the baby needed. Maya's decision was made. She had to find someone who could help, someone who could take the baby in, who could care for it in ways that she couldn't. The city might not be kind, but she would find a way to make it kind for the baby. With a final glance over her shoulder, Maya took the first step toward the unknown. The baby's cries had stopped, but she could still hear the echoes of its desperation in her mind. She wasn't sure where she was going, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going to stop until the baby was safe. The air felt colder as Maya walked through the empty streets, her steps purposeful but weary. Her body, still aching from the journey, moved automatically, as though on a mission she couldn't ignore. The world outside the park had returned to its indifferent rhythm. The faint glow of streetlights, the distant sound of traffic. But Maya could feel the weight of the night pressing down on her. Each step she took with the baby in her mouth felt like a step deeper into the unknown. The city had always felt like a maze to Maya, a place filled with danger and opportunity, but also with coldness, where every corner held a new challenge, every face a stranger. Now it felt more like a labyrinth than ever. She had always kept to the edges, out of sight, out of mind. But tonight there was no escaping the responsibility she had taken on. The baby, so small, so fragile, was hers to protect, and for that, she had to find a way to trust someone, to find help. But who could she trust? As she moved through the dimly lit streets, Maya's eyes scanned every passerby, every flicker of movement. She could feel the weight of her decision bearing down on her. She couldn't keep running forever. Sooner or later, she would have to confront the truth. She couldn't protect the baby on her own. She was just a stray dog after all. What could she do that the humans couldn't? The city was a jungle where humans fought for space, for survival. Maya had survived, but she couldn't do it alone anymore. Her heart clenched as she glanced back at the baby, still so small, still so fragile in her care. But as she continued her walk, her mind racing, she saw something that made her pause. At the far end of the street, a figure was moving toward her. The person was tall, their figure silhouetted by the streetlight behind them. The figure moved with purpose, their pace steady. Maya instinctively stepped back into the shadows, her body low to the ground as she watched, her muscles tensed. It was a man, dressed in dark clothing, walking with a steady gait, his face obscured by the hood of his jacket. Maya didn't know why, but something about him caught her attention. It wasn't the normal fear or wariness she felt around humans. It was something else. Something in the way he moved, the way his steps seemed to be guided by a purpose, something that resonated with Maya's instincts. She didn't know what it was. Perhaps it was the way he seemed to glide effortlessly through the streets, as though the city was his to command, or the way his eyes flicked around, as if searching for something, someone. For a brief moment, Maya considered running, but something stopped her. The baby's soft breathing in her mouth, the pull of responsibility, made her hesitate. She stayed hidden in the shadows, watching the man approach. As he drew nearer, Maya's heart skipped a beat. He stopped, not far from where she crouched, just a few feet away. He seemed to sense something. His head turned sharply, his eyes scanning the darkness, looking toward the area where Maya was hidden. For a moment, everything seemed to stand still. Maya's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't move, couldn't make a sound. The man stood still, waiting. Then, without warning, he stepped forward, his eyes narrowing slightly as he peered into the darkness. Maya's heart raced. What would he do? Would he see her? Would he come closer? And then, as if by some miracle, the man looked away. He took another step forward, heading toward the corner, his pace steady but unhurried. Maya exhaled, the tension leaving her body as he passed by. She waited for a moment, making sure he was gone. She had narrowly escaped being noticed. But in that fleeting moment, something had changed in her. She wasn't sure why, but she felt like that brief encounter, that fleeting moment of connection, had stirred something in her. Maybe it was just instinct. Maybe it was just the desperation of the night. But she felt as though something had shifted. With the man now gone, Maya allowed herself to breathe again. She moved cautiously from the shadows, her eyes still scanning the street, still wary of any danger. The city was full of surprises, but she had to keep moving. The baby needed her. But this time, Maya's steps felt different. She wasn't just running away from the danger anymore. She was moving toward something. Toward hope. She continued down the street, moving with more purpose, more confidence. The park, the convenience store, the alleyways, they had all been places of refuge, but they weren't enough. They weren't the answer. The city was big, overwhelming, but it had its own way of guiding you when you were lost. Maya knew that now. The night hadn't ended in fear. It had ended in the possibility of something more. She passed several more blocks, moving deeper into the heart of the city, when she noticed something. A small cafe tucked between two buildings, its lights still on despite the late hour. The door was slightly ajar, as though someone had just stepped inside and left it open in haste. A sign hung above the door, open 24 hours. Maya's instincts stirred. It wasn't much, but the light and warmth of the cafe felt inviting, almost comforting. She stood at the entrance for a moment, considering her options. She could go inside. But what if it wasn't safe? What if someone inside would turn her away? She was just a stray dog after all. But the thought of the baby in her mouth, its fragile body depending on her, made her decision. She couldn't wait any longer. The baby needed help, and she had to try. Maya stepped forward, her body tense with uncertainty. She nudged the door open slowly, stepping into the warmth of the cafe. The soft hum of music played in the background, and the smell of fresh coffee filled the air. Maya's eyes scanned the room. There were a few people inside, sitting at tables, chatting quietly. The cafe wasn't crowded, but it was warm, inviting, a stark contrast to the cold, indifferent streets outside. As she stepped further inside, a woman behind the counter noticed her. Her eyes widened for a moment, but then, without hesitation, she smiled. "Hey there," she said softly, her voice warm and welcoming. "What can I do for you?" Maya hesitated, looking down at the baby in her mouth, its tiny body still, its cries silenced for now. She stepped closer to the counter, and the woman's eyes followed her gaze. The warmth in her expression softened, and she took a step forward. "Is that a baby?" she asked quietly, her voice full of concern. Maya nodded, her eyes never leaving the woman's face. She hadn't expected this, hadn't expected someone to see her, to understand what she was doing. The woman crouched down, her gaze gentle and calm. "Don't worry," she whispered. "You're doing the right thing. I'll help." And for the first time that night, Maya felt a small flicker of hope. The woman's voice was soft but steady, her words carrying a sense of calm assurance that Maya hadn't realized she was so desperately craving. As the woman crouched down, her eyes never left Maya, and for a moment, it felt as though the entire world outside the cafe had faded into the background. The distant hum of the city, the cold air from the night, they were all swallowed up by the warmth of this small space, this little haven of light. Maya hesitated for a moment, her heart pounding as the woman reached out slowly, gently. She still didn't know who this person was or what they wanted. Maya's instincts had always been her guiding force. She had learned to trust herself, to rely on her own survival, but now she had a baby to protect. The uncertainty gnawed at her, making her wary, hesitant. But the woman's eyes were kind, her expression one of concern, not fear. She wasn't scared of Maya. She wasn't running away from her. The woman extended her hand, palm up, slowly and deliberately, in a gesture that Maya couldn't ignore. "It's okay," she whispered again, her voice soothing, calm. "You can trust me." Maya's muscles tensed, but as she looked down at the baby, still cradled delicately in her mouth, her decision felt clearer. The baby needed help, and Maya couldn't provide everything it required on her own. She was no longer just a stray dog. She was the protector of this tiny life. And maybe, just maybe, this woman could help. After a long, breathless moment, Maya took a step forward. She nudged the baby gently with her nose, placing it softly on the counter before her. The woman immediately adjusted her position, crouching down more and carefully taking the baby into her arms. The shift was almost imperceptible, but the weight of it was immense. Maya's heart raced as she watched the woman cradle the baby against her chest, the tender care in her movement sending a wave of relief through Maya's body. For the first time that night, Maya felt a sense of release, a sense that the baby, this small and fragile life she had carried for so long, was safe. The woman looked down at the baby, her expression softening further. She checked the baby's pulse, its breath, its fragile form. "It's going to be okay," she murmured, more to herself than to Maya, though Maya heard it clearly. Maya stood back, her body still tense, her instincts unsure. Was she supposed to stay here? Would the woman turn her away now that she had taken the baby? But the woman didn't seem afraid. She didn't look at Maya like she was some stray dog who had no business being here. She simply smiled gently, her face filled with compassion and understanding. "You did the right thing," the woman said softly, looking back at Maya. "You saved this baby's life." Maya's heart skipped. She didn't know how to respond, how to explain that she had only acted out of an instinct that had consumed her. To protect, to care, to give the baby a chance when no one else could. She had never thought of herself as a hero. But hearing the woman's words, seeing the baby safe in her arms, made Maya feel something she had never truly known before: pride. A quiet, gentle pride that settled deep in her chest. The woman moved the baby closer to her, ensuring its comfort, adjusting the blanket around its small body. Then she looked up at Maya once more, her eyes filled with something else, something deeper. "Do you have a name?" she asked softly, her voice still full of warmth. Maya looked up at her, confused for a moment, before realizing that the woman wasn't just talking to the baby. She was asking about Maya, too. She hadn't thought about herself in the midst of everything. She hadn't thought about who she was or what name she could possibly have. She was just Maya, the stray dog who had wandered the streets for as long as she could remember. But the woman's gaze was unwavering, expectant in a gentle way. Maya tilted her head slightly, considering for a moment. She hadn't known that she would be asked such a question. She had never been called by a name, never been seen as anything other than the stray, the invisible creature in the shadows of the city. But as she stood there, watching the woman care for the baby, her heart began to shift. She wasn't invisible anymore. Not to this woman. Not to the baby. She had done something that no one expected. She had stepped out of the shadows and into the light, not just for herself, but for someone else. "I'm Maya," she said softly, her voice barely more than a whisper. The woman nodded, a smile tugging at her lips. "Maya, a good name," she murmured, her gaze still soft and understanding. Maya felt something deep within her stir. It was like the weight of the world had shifted just a little, and for the first time in her life she felt seen, truly seen. Not as a stray, not as an outsider, but as someone who mattered. And for the first time, Maya allowed herself to believe it. She looked down at the baby, still cradled gently in the woman's arms, its tiny hands clenched in peaceful sleep. The woman had taken the baby from her, yes, but she wasn't taking it away. She was caring for it. She was giving it what Maya couldn't. In this moment, Maya felt a quiet resolve settle within her. She had done her part. She had saved the baby, and now it was in safe hands. But Maya wasn't done yet. "Thank you," Maya whispered, the words surprising even herself. "For helping." The woman smiled again, her face glowing with quiet joy. "You don't need to thank me, Maya," she said softly. "You saved this baby. You brought it here. You did all the hard work." Maya stood in silence, letting the weight of the moment wash over her. She had done something incredible. She had taken a life into her care, something that was never hers to begin with, and she had protected it with everything she had. And now, standing in this warm cafe, she realized that maybe, just maybe, she could finally find a place in the world. Not as a stray, not as an outsider, but as someone who mattered. Someone who had made a difference. The woman turned her attention back to the baby, adjusting the blanket one last time. Maya stayed close, her gaze fixed on the tiny life now nestled in the woman's arms. And as the night wore on, Maya felt a quiet sense of peace settle over her. The world outside still felt uncertain, but she no longer felt alone. She had found her place, her purpose, not just as a survivor, but as a protector. And in that moment, she realized that no matter what came next, she had done something right. The baby was safe, and that was enough. Maya sat by the door of the cafe, her body low to the ground, her eyes focused on the woman who was now gently rocking the baby in her arms. It had been hours since she had found the wreckage. Hours since she had first felt the weight of the baby in her mouth, and hours since she had taken the first tentative steps into a world of care and protection that she had never known. Despite the warmth of the cafe and the comfort of the woman's arms around the baby, Maya couldn't help but feel the lingering tension in her body, the constant awareness of the outside world. The city, despite its quiet moments, was still alive with noise. It was a cacophony of horns, distant chatter, and the hum of passing cars. But in the small cafe, everything felt different. Maya's ears, so attuned to the chaos of the streets, now seemed to block out all but the sound of the baby's gentle breaths. The woman sat at a small corner table, speaking quietly to the baby, her fingers gently stroking the infant's forehead. Maya couldn't let herself relax entirely. She wasn't sure why, but the world beyond the cafe still felt like it was closing in on her. The baby had been so close to being lost, so close to slipping away from her grasp. Now, she had brought it to safety, but how long would it last? How long could this peaceful moment last in a city like this, where everything and everyone seemed to be constantly moving forward, indifferent to the pain of others? But then the door opened with a jingle, and Maya's heart leapt in her chest. She immediately rose to her feet, her muscles coiled tight with instinct. The woman didn't seem to notice at first, still focused on the baby in her arms, speaking in soft, comforting tones. Maya's eyes darted to the newcomer, a man in his 30s, dressed in a paramedic uniform. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his face wary but determined. The moment he stepped through the door, his eyes immediately scanned the room. Maya's body stiffened, and she moved closer to the counter. Was he here for the baby? Was this the help the woman had been waiting for? Her thoughts raced as she watched him approach, his eyes locking on the baby in the woman's arms. Maya didn't know why, but the sight of the man made her anxious. This was the moment she had feared. This was the moment when the baby could be taken from her, from the woman who had offered the baby care. But the paramedic's expression wasn't one of suspicion or anger. It was a look of gentle recognition. His eyes softened as he saw the woman holding the baby, his hand reaching up to adjust the strap on his shoulder bag. He approached the woman carefully, his movements slow and deliberate, as though he didn't want to startle anyone. "I'm sorry to intrude," he said in a calm, professional tone, his voice carrying a quiet authority. "I'm with the paramedics. I was just notified of a child in distress. Are you the one who brought this baby in?" The woman, still holding the baby, nodded. "Yes," she replied, her voice just as soft. "I found this baby after the accident. A dog, she found the baby first, and she brought it here." The paramedic's eyebrows furrowed slightly as he glanced at Maya, who had stepped closer, watching the interaction closely. "The dog," he repeated, glancing back at the woman. "Yes," the woman said, her voice full of gratitude. "She brought the baby into the cafe. She was so gentle with it. I'm not sure what would have happened without her." Maya's heart skipped a beat. They weren't going to take the baby away from her. The thought of handing the baby off to strangers had caused a tight knot in her chest. She had been so afraid of the moment when she would have to give the baby up. But this man, he didn't seem like a threat. He didn't seem like he was there to take the baby from the woman who had already shown such care and tenderness. The paramedic smiled softly, turning his gaze back to the woman holding the baby. "You did the right thing," he said quietly before looking back at Maya. "And it looks like the dog did too." Maya felt a strange surge of emotion at his words. They weren't words she had expected. Her entire life she had been an outcast, never fully accepted by anyone, always on the periphery of the human world. And yet, in this moment, this stranger, this man in the paramedic uniform, was recognizing her. A stray, a dog with no home, as someone who had done something good. The weight of that recognition was heavier than anything Maya had ever felt. The man took a step closer to the baby, his attention now fully focused on the infant. "We'll need to take the baby to the hospital," he said gently, his voice now filled with the kind of professionalism that only someone who had seen the worst of things could possess. "The baby needs to be checked over properly, but it's lucky it had someone looking out for it." Maya's eyes darted to the woman's face, searching for some sign of what she was feeling. The woman's gaze met hers, her expression soft but resolute. "I'll go with you," she said to the paramedic, nodding slowly. "I can help. I can make sure the baby gets the care it needs." Maya felt a strange wave of relief wash over her. The baby would be safe. The The baby would be taken to a place where it could be cared for, checked, and healed. She had done all she could, and now, the baby would be in the hands of those who could help it. The woman would go with the paramedic. The baby wasn't being taken away from her. It was being taken to safety, to care. The paramedic turned to Maya again, his gaze softening. "You're welcome to come with us," he said, his voice full of understanding. "You've already done your part, but if you'd like, we'll get you a warm blanket too." Maya hesitated, looking from the paramedic to the woman and back to the baby. She didn't need a blanket. She didn't need anything for herself. All she had ever wanted was to protect this baby. And now, she had done it. The world outside was still uncertain, still harsh and indifferent, but in this moment, Maya knew she had found something. She had found her purpose. She had done something that mattered. Maya stepped back, her tail swishing softly as she moved toward the door. The paramedic opened it for her, and as she stepped into the cool night air, she took a deep breath, knowing that the baby would be okay. The baby was safe. That was all that mattered. The world outside the warmth of the cafe felt different now, as though Maya had crossed an invisible threshold. The city, once so harsh and unforgiving, had softened in her mind. She had done it. She had found the baby, protected it, and brought it to a place where it could receive the help it desperately needed. But even with that weight lifted off her shoulders, there was something inside her that wouldn't let go. Maya stood by the door of the cafe, her paws still damp from the night's rain. The sounds of the city had returned to their familiar, relentless rhythm. Cars honking, people shouting, the faint hum of distant conversations. But none of it felt the same. It was as though Maya had gained a new understanding of the world. For the first time, she felt like she had purpose. As the door closed behind her, the world outside greeted her with an overwhelming sense of silence. She paused, looking around. The street seemed bigger now, like a vast ocean she had just stepped into, a place where everything could change. Maya had always been a stray, moving through the cracks of society unnoticed, forgotten. She had never belonged to anyone. She had never had anyone to care for her. But now, as she stood there, she realized that something had shifted within her. She wasn't just a stray anymore. She was someone who had protected a life, someone who had made a difference. It was early morning now. The first light of dawn was beginning to creep into the sky, painting the horizon with soft shades of pink and orange. The air was still cool, but the weight of the night was lifting, replaced by the quiet promise of a new day. Maya took a few steps forward, her body still tired from the long night, but her heart filled with something she hadn't known before. A sense of pride, of peace. She had done her part. The baby was safe now, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she had contributed to something bigger than herself. But as she walked down the empty street, she knew that her journey wasn't over. Not yet. The world was still waiting. Maya had done the unthinkable. She had saved a life. But now she would have to find her place in this world. The world that had always seemed so vast, so indifferent. As she walked, Maya's gaze wandered to the empty park she had passed earlier. The oak tree, the place where she had found a brief moment of peace, stood in the distance, its branches bare and reaching up toward the sky. It felt like a sign, like a place she could return to. But the thought of returning to the same streets, to the same lonely existence, filled her with unease. She didn't belong there anymore. Not after everything that had happened. She couldn't go back to just surviving. She had a new role now. She had to find a way to stay connected to the world, to be part of something. Maya stopped at the edge of the park, looking out at the streets beyond. She had protected the baby, and she had brought it to safety. But what about herself? What about her own needs, her own future? The answer was still unclear, but she knew that something had to change. Over the next few days, Maya found herself returning to the park. She would come back to the oak tree, where the shadows were long and the world felt distant. She wasn't sure what she was searching for, but she knew that the city, with all its noise and chaos, could not provide the answers. She needed something more, something deeper, something that would give her a sense of belonging. The woman who had taken the baby to the hospital had promised that Maya could visit. She had promised that she could return, that she would be welcomed. But Maya couldn't shake the feeling that she was still an outsider in that world. One morning, as she wandered through the park, Maya noticed something she hadn't before. Near the oak tree there was a small group of people, a family, sitting on a bench, laughing and talking quietly. They were eating breakfast, sharing food, their voices filled with warmth and love. Maya watched them from a distance, feeling an unfamiliar pang in her chest. She had never known this kind of connection, this kind of closeness. But as the family left, the woman turned to Maya, noticing her for the first time. She smiled, a smile that was kind, not pitying, just understanding. She approached Maya slowly, crouching down to the dog's level. Maya tensed, but the woman's expression was gentle, her eyes soft. "You're the one who helped that baby, aren't you?" the woman asked, her voice full of recognition. Maya nodded slowly, feeling a strange warmth spread through her. She wasn't just a dog to this woman. She wasn't just the stray who had come and gone in the shadows. She was someone who mattered. The woman reached out a hand, not to pet her, but to offer something else, something more. "You're welcome here," the woman said softly. "You know, we've been looking for a dog like you. We've been thinking about adopting a dog for a while. We've got a nice house with a yard, plenty of space to roam. And I think you'd like it." Maya stood still, unsure of what to make of her words. She had never been wanted before. She had never been given a choice. But now there was a possibility, a chance for something more, a chance for a life beyond the streets. The woman smiled again, her gaze full of understanding. "Think about it," she said, her voice warmed. "You've already done so much for that baby. Now, let's see what we can do for you." Maya's heart raced as she stood there, unsure of how to respond. She had always been a stray, always on the move, always on the outside. But now, the world seemed to have opened up to her in a way she hadn't expected. Maybe this was the beginning of something new. A life where she didn't have to fight for survival, a life where she could have love, care, and a sense of belonging. Maya turned and looked out over the park, her tail wagging slightly, her heart filled with a strange, hopeful anticipation. The world was still uncertain, still filled with challenges, but for the first time she felt like she had a place in it. She wasn't just a stray anymore, she was Maya, a protector. And now, she had the chance to be something more. The morning sun began to filter through the trees, casting soft golden light across the park. Maya sat beneath the oak tree once again, the familiar bark rough beneath her paws. The city beyond was stirring, its noisy hum growing louder, but in this little corner of the world, the quiet was a welcome relief. The past few days had been a whirlwind of change, a whirlwind Maya hadn't quite anticipated, but one that had brought her to a place she had never imagined possible. Maya's body had grown stronger, her muscles recovering from the long night of running and carrying the baby. But it was more than just physical recovery. Something had shifted inside her, a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose. She wasn't just a stray dog anymore. She had been something more, a protector, a guardian. She had stepped into a role she never thought she would take, and in doing so had found her place in a world that once seemed cold and indifferent. But now, as Maya sat there, her eyes scanning the peaceful park around her, she knew that this was just the beginning. The world had a way of pushing forward, of moving on, and she couldn't afford to get left behind. She had done her part for the baby, she had carried it to safety, and now it was time for her to figure out what came next. The baby was safe, taken to the hospital, cared for. And the woman, the one who had shown Maya kindness and recognition, had promised that Maya would be welcome. Yet, even as those words echoed in her mind, Maya felt the weight of uncertainty again. Could she truly belong to a family? Could she trust that this new life, this new chance, would last? As if on cue, the sound of footsteps approached from behind. Maya turned her head, her body tensing at first, ready to retreat back into the shadows. But when she saw the familiar figure of the woman, her expression gentle, the tension in her body eased. The woman was smiling, and Maya could see the warmth in her eyes. It wasn't just an offer. It was a promise. "You've been thinking about it, haven't you?" the woman asked as she crouched down beside Maya, her voice soft, understanding. Maya looked up at her, her tail wagging slightly. She had thought about the offer, thought about what it might mean to leave the streets behind and step into a home, a real home. The woman had a life that seemed so different from the one Maya had known. But could she take that step? Could she trust this woman, trust that she would truly be cared for in a way Maya had never experienced? The woman reached down and gently scratched Maya behind the ears, her touch comforting, not intrusive. Maya leaned into the touch, her body instinctively trusting her warmth, and in that moment, something inside her shifted again. This woman had seen her, had recognized her as something more than just a stray. She had already proven her kindness by taking the baby, and now she was offering something more. Maya didn't need to search her heart for long to know that she was ready for this new chapter, for the next step in her life. With a soft sigh, Maya stepped forward, nudging the woman's hand with her nose. The woman smiled, her eyes lighting up with something like joy. "You're ready, aren't you?" the woman whispered, her voice filled with quiet certainty. Maya wagged her tail again, the motion small but filled with meaning. She was ready, ready to leave the shadows behind, ready to take a place in the world, to find a family that would care for her. She didn't know what that would look like, or how it would feel. She didn't know if she would ever fully trust again, but she knew that this woman, this person who had seen her worth, was a place to start. The woman stood up and gestured toward the path leading out of the park. "Come on, Maya. Let's go home." Maya followed her without hesitation, her steps confident now, her body light with the knowledge that this was the right decision. There was no more uncertainty in her heart. There was only the certainty of the next step forward, of finding her place in this new life. As they walked, Maya glanced up at the woman, noticing how she moved with a quiet, gentle strength, the same strength Maya had felt in herself when she had protected the baby, the same strength she was beginning to recognize in her own heart. They walked through the park, the sun rising higher, the light now golden and warm. The city around them was still loud, still alive with its ceaseless energy. But Maya didn't mind. The world felt different now. It didn't feel so big, so overwhelming. It felt like something she could belong to. They reached the edge of the park, where a small car waited. The woman smiled at Maya as she opened the door, and Maya hesitated for only a moment before stepping inside. The car was warm, a contrast to the cool air of the morning. As the engine started and they began to drive, Maya looked out the window, watching the city pass by. The streets, the alleys, the familiar corners of her old world all slipped away in the rearview mirror. For the first time, Maya didn't feel like a stranger. She felt like she was going home. The woman reached over and gently stroked Maya's head, a soft, comforting gesture. "You did something incredible, Maya," she said, her voice filled with quiet pride. "You've given us a gift. You've saved a life." Maya's heart swelled at her words. She had saved the baby. She had found a place to belong. And now, she was on a journey to find something more: love, companionship, a home. As the car continued down the road, the world unfolding before her, Maya realized that she had crossed a threshold, and there was no turning back. Her journey had just begun. But this time, she wasn't alone. She had a family now. And for the first time, Maya knew that she truly belonged.